welcoming everyone to this week's Citizens Climate University. It's a weekly webinar program of Citizens Climate Lobbies that provides CCL supporters like you and I with access to in-depth training opportunities on topics related to climate change and effective climate advocacy. I'm your host, Brett Cease, and tonight we're going to join CCL Research Coordinator Jerry Hinkle for a review of 6 different climate impact and policy tools available to CCL volunteers in our local impacts category of our resource directory to help you understand the impacts that your state faces. Jerry is going to review some of the recent research available to include in your advocacy, including highlighting our health co-benefits by state from decarbonization resource, the household impact study resource, the rural economics benefits of climate policy research done, as well as a variety of other new tools that he'll introduce tonight. Let's jump right in with a little reminder as well of our 3 learning goals. So if we've done our job well, the objectives of this session are threefold. First, learn about the 6 different tools that highlight benefits of climate policy by state. Secondly, we're going to understand how information on these statewide tools can be accessed on CCL Community. And then we'll begin to form an action plan for helping create a climate impact resource portfolio for your state. And even though we don't have Rick and Dana with us tonight, I did want to follow Jerry's wisdom in acknowledging that both Rick and Dana will also be available after tonight for your questions and your consultation, because our wonderful presenter, Jerry Hinkle, is actually in his last full week as a CCL staff member. That doesn't mean he's going away, and I'll let Jerry share a little bit more about his next step in his journey, continuing on with the board of directors in just a moment. But let me just share a little bit about Jerry. Jerry's been giving public presentations on climate since 2001, been lobbying Congress on it since 2006, and been with it with CCL since 2011. Jerry started what is now the Presenters and Schedulers Action Team, as well as the Economics and Science Policy Network Action Teams. Jerry was the Northern California CCL coordinator for 6 years. He served on CCL's governing board for the last 4 years, and as our economic research coordinator for 3 years. He holds MA degrees in economics and in climate policy and has published several articles in these areas and is committed to leaving a sustainable world for his 2 amazing daughters. So it is such a real treat to have you here tonight, Jerry. We're so honored that you're spending your last full week giving us this training and orientation. And I'll pass it to you to take it from here to kind of walk us through your next steps as well as what we can look forward to tonight.
Thank you so much. And as I told staff, it's been such a pleasure working with you. I think you just do a bang up job in climate education. You are a gift to CCL. It's been a pleasure working with you. Yeah, so Rick and Dana are up here because they're going to be the one answering questions on this. So here's what we're going to do tonight. So there are these 6 tools, we'll call them, that highlight the benefits and quantify very often the benefits of climate policy by state. So it's like a suite of tools that's particularly useful for state advocacy. So we wanted to point them out. Some of them are old and you're probably familiar with them, especially if you've been around. Some of them are really quite new. And so they are a very recent study from the National Academy of Sciences on co-benefits of climate policy, health, ag, and labor. The household impact study, that's the one that's really been around, that shows the financial benefits by state of carbon fee and dividend. Recent article that also shows, yes, CF&D does help the poor, and they've quantified by how much it alleviates poverty. Then the 4th tool is an MIT study that came out just last year that shows net climate policy benefits by state, kind of handy. 5th, and you may have seen this, the rural economic benefits, again, by state. And then finally, a tool just came out from a group called Climate Exchange that really details all of the state level climate policies. Okay, look at that, just went forward. So let's get started. This is just fabulous. This is from the National Academy of Sciences, just came out in November, and it quantifies co-benefits. So what a co-benefit is if you embrace policy, implement policy that reduces greenhouse gas emissions, a lot of other great stuff happens as a result of the reduced air pollution that comes with that. So SOx, NOx, the very deadly PM 2.5 and ozone are all reduced significantly depending on how much greenhouse gas emissions. Well, these provide great benefits in the form of health, labor, lost work days, and agriculture, reduced crop yields. If you diminish those pollutants, you get significant benefits. This was based on the work of Drew Schindel, which we had brought out before and talked about in the economic benefits of CF&D course, but it was just finally published. And the numbers are actually up a little bit. The benefits are roughly 800 billion a year. Let me show you that. So I'll show you later the interactive tool. That map that you just saw is an interactive tool. You can run your cursor over a state and it will give you values for the state. But here are the national values. So a policy consistent with our NDC, with our Paris climate goals that reduces US emissions relative to 2005 by 50% by 2030. You all know that goal, right? That's a 2C policy. If you continued on with a policy that ambitious, and the rest of the world followed along, you'd limit temperature increases to about 2C. What it does for the US is avoid 68,000 premature deaths every year, prevent 20,000 cases of dementia. You avoid the loss of 4 million work days. You're increasing wheat, corn, and soy productions by about 5 kilotons. Again, this is each and every year for this 20-year period. Approximate value, 800 billion a year. And one of the things that is highlighted by this study, what they show in their summary is there had been a conversation in the literature that climate policy is expensive, it can diminish the economic growth. Eventually, climate benefits are much greater. This is absolutely the right thing to do, but you might take a hit to the economy in the short term. This study makes clear, nope. Climate policy pays for itself right away. So there's a smaller benefit in the near term, a huge benefit in the longer term. And if you read the economic benefits of CFD paper, that's made even more clear. But so this is really nice, showing short-term benefits, because Congress tends to be somewhat short-term oriented. Okay, that was tool number one. And again, I'll go over the interactive tool with you later when I switch screens to show you exactly how to work it. Because it's, of the 6 tools I'm going to show you tonight, that's probably the most powerful. This is fabulous, but you're familiar with it. This is the household impact study. And it estimates by congressional district and by state who the winners and losers are. And what I mean by winners and losers, I mean financially. Everybody gets the same dividend, okay? So everybody gets an average dividend. So whether you come out ahead or behind is a function of your cost increase, which is a function of your footprint, your carbon footprint. How much do you pollute? If you pollute on average, you break even. And what we've seen clearly is that the poor buy less stuff and so have a smaller footprint. Their costs go up less. They come out ahead financially. Isn't that great? Nationally, 61% of families, 68% of people come out ahead financially. 24% have a very minor loss, and we define that as a loss that is less than 0.2%. So less than a fifth of 1% of their income. Hardly notice it, kind of a break even. So on average, almost 2/3 of people come out ahead. That's great. We live in a democracy. This is a powerful selling point, but especially the poor, right? Especially the people that need it most. 96%, 85%, even the third, the middle quintile, 68% of households. So well over 70% of people are going to come out ahead. This is a good story. But again, you're familiar with it. And again, I think this is a point worth repeating, especially Republicans. Why do they come out ahead? Because they pollute less. That's the second policy tool. Now a similar one that also looks at this economic benefit, financial benefit from CF&D to the poor, but they put it in a different way that I think could be very useful to our advocacy, especially to environmental justice organizations. So they take a carbon fee and dividend policy. It's a little different than EICDA, for example, or the household impact study. Okay, $30 a ton initially, and then goes up by 5% a year. So they look at what happens over 15 years, and at the end of 15 years, the carbon fee is up to $62. All funds return to households equally. It pulls 1.6 million people out of poverty. That is going to resonate with certain audiences. It's 4.3% of the current impoverished population of the United States. And that figure is pretty consistent across the states. Child poverty alleviation, very powerful, very important to us. 500,000 people are pulled, 500,000 children are pulled out of poverty with this, revenue neutral carbon tax. The higher the tax, the more people that will be pulled out of poverty. And what we either have or will have for you shortly on the website, on community, is an interactive tool. You see it here. And it's simply by the number of people pulled out of poverty. So the darker the color, the more people that are pulled out of poverty. Again, pick your audiences. This is probably going to be compelling with environmental justice, for whom poverty alleviation is very near the top of their priorities. Okay, that's the third tool. Here's the fourth. Here's a study that came out from MIT recently. It values by state the economic impact of a particular policy that's not all that economically efficient. So there's a bit of an economic hit there. We could do a lot better on that front, but it's essentially a by state cap and trade policy where all the money from the permits that are auctioned go back to households. Okay, and it's going to look at three things. I'll go here to the bottom. Here's the economics, the loss in what they call welfare in the green. Okay, here's the climate benefits and then the health benefits detailed by state. The purple line shows the net, and it shows it on a per capita basis by state. And so what you're going to see is something that we've known, we have said over and over. Here we're drilling down to the state level. Climate policy is good for people, and it is. And here you can go in. We recently went into Illinois. Here we go. That's why it's in yellow. Like $430 per person. That's the benefit for policy in this particular case that reduces emissions 45% by 2005. Now, let me just get on my soapbox real quick. These estimates are conservative. The net benefits are significantly higher. Why do I say that? This is an estimate. It's the current official estimate, but it's old as the hills. $59 a ton for the climate benefit. It will be revised this year by the Biden administration. Our estimate uses something from the University of Chicago, says more like $125 a ton at least. But this is based on science from the 90s. It's dated. We've learned a lot since the 90s. The value of reducing carbon emissions is far greater than this. And the health benefit you see here is from the EPA. The PNAS article, the National Academy of Sciences that I just showed you, shows the health benefits to be about 2 times as great. So I'm just saying, look, use this, but make folks clear that these are very conservative estimates. That's it. Fifth tool, we unveiled this in the fall. What we have come to understand is that any climate policy, a carbon tax, a clean energy standard, the first most immediate thing that happens is in the power sector, we reduce the use of fossil fuels, we increase the use of renewables, especially wind and solar, for power generation. Okay. This is a study that we used some research from RMI, a consultancy, and then we ran our own scenario. And what becomes clear is the benefits from this when there's the increased build out of solar and wind power. Where does it go? Do the solar farms go downtown? No, they go into rural areas where there is some land available. Same thing with the wind farms. These benefit the rural communities of America, and that's kind of important for a couple reasons. One, they're a little poorer than the rest. They're about 20% of US population and about 10% of US GDP. So they have about half as much as the rest of us. Okay, so they need the money. They need this economic benefit. Second, they're 80% of the benefits in this instance go to congressional districts that are currently held by a Republican. So these rural communities tend to be more conservative, tend to have conservative members of Congress. That's one of our priorities. So this is an important tool. But the underlying message here is climate policy boosts rural economies. We've got a full educational session on this in community, and I just want to give you some highlights. So we utilized the scenario that our research consultant, Kevin Ummel, he did the household impact study for us. He said, this is the scenario that is most likely to reflect an aggressive carbon price. And it shows a significant build out of renewable power such that about 65% of power comes from renewables by 2035. Okay, huge increase in wind and solar wind and solar power. Okay, and here are the bottom line results nationally. Okay, let me take a step back. What you're going to get on community for each state is a one-page explainer, and it will show a graph like this that I have here for Iowa. It will show and discuss that a strong policy like the one that we are simulating here will provide over $17 billion to these rural economic communities. This is direct revenue, direct financial benefit. We'll discuss in this explainer that the indirect benefit is many times more, and we discuss why. I won't get into it now. And then we'll give you a graph by state and show you the specific benefit by state. For Iowa, I just pulled out Iowa, it's 410 million. What is this benefit? If you put up a solar farm or a wind farm, not all the benefits, not all the money for that will go into that rural community. Okay, the windmills may come from elsewhere, the solar panels may come from elsewhere. Here's what you will get. You'll get construction wages for the build out of the farm. The land will be leased, and that will become lease payments for the landowner. Okay, there will be tax revenues generated from the cost of the electricity produced, and then O&M wages, right? Operations and maintenance. Once you got the wind farm up, you're going to need to maintain it. And here is the total for Iowa. So again, you get nice detailed benefits estimated by state. You get the pretty picture. This is a 2-page leave behind. You get the 1-page explainer plus the graphic. Again, take a look at it. It's not great for every state. There's not every state has a significant increase in renewables. It won't be compelling, but for many it is, and many of them are conservative states. So that's 5, and I think I'm going to number 6 here. The final one, and this does not estimate benefits. Okay, what this is a state policy tracker. It takes 51 categories of policies. Okay, and these are the subcategories of policies: climate governance and equity, adaptation and resilience, electricity, buildings and efficiency, transportation, ag, industries, materials, and waste management. What policies are going on at the state to attempt to reduce emissions? Okay, and it's just, you're sort of grading your state. It's a great way to get to know where your state's at, what they've done, what they haven't done. You can obviously compare it to other states. With this tool, there's an interactive map. You run your cursor over each of the states, and you can see the number of policies. You can get additional detailed information. If you're going to do state advocacy, it's a pretty handy tool. Go ahead, sir.
Sounds great. Yeah, no, thank you, Jerry. The only 2 things I wanted to say in closing are just a recommendation of really where and how to use the information that we're talking through tonight. So the first of which is just acknowledging that if you are interested in doing this kind of research work, there's a whole team that your state can benefit from. And so, after thinking about this, if you're listening on later, which is where most of our tuners in are going to be, or if you're joining us live, think through if you are interested in kind of compiling something, and then reach out to your liaison or state coordinator to touch base on how you can best utilize these state level climate tools in your state's advocacy, because obviously every state's got their own political economy and climate, and we want to just make sure that people that are doing this work are in sync with the state leadership. And if you're curious about where you can find that contact information in the chat, I'll put a link where you can find your regional and state coordinators. So we did just want to flag that because we don't want to duplicate efforts. So what to do with this now? So there's a lot of information, and like Jerry shared, especially being strategic and selective about which of these tools works for your state, I think is really the next level of filtering through and figuring out what's relevant or really paints the best picture for where you're at. So what we'd like for you to do is just think through, anyone that is interested in taking this on, as you think through for your state, how you can use this. Well, one of those suggestions we have is creating some kind of a research brief, like a 1 or 2 page document that can really highlight, a lot of the benefits and the main takeaways that you think would be most helpful for a meeting, or some other way that you can convey that information is an LTE or a press article. We also have a lot of social media savvy volunteers, and so putting together a little explainer thread, if you will. You've seen those on Twitter as well as Instagram, just being able to highlight this information with charts and explanatory graphs, a really short and easy way that we'd love to have people create threads and share them. And then where to present, a couple of thoughts or suggestions here. Obviously, as you do your research, getting practice, giving a presentation at your next state or regional group leader call. So you've got an audience in your state or region to really highlight and workshop that with. Preparing it for your next meeting with an endorser or elected official, not necessarily even your member of Congress, but state level legislators, I think, would absolutely benefit from your research as well. Chapter meetings are a great venue for practice. And then, of course, we love to learn in the forums. So as you put together your research and have any suggestions for others doing this, definitely know that we'd love to highlight those on this training page in the forums too. But if you have any other questions after tonight, Jerry as well as Dana have made themselves generously available. I'll put a link to both of their emails here in the chat, as well as just a link generally to our forums. So Jerry, I'll pass it to you for the final word here. I'll just close by saying thank you all for being here tonight, and obviously really looking forward to hearing how people configure and put these together for their own state and specific areas of presenting.
Normally I'd say I'm available for questions, and I am, and the email will be live because I've got 2.5 years left on the board, so I'll have that addressed for at least that time. But thank you for your advocacy. thank you for putting your heart and soul into this, taking the time to learn these tools and to make the case. It's there's no more important work that you can do as far as I can tell. So thank you.
Thank you. I thought this was just terrific, very helpful.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration. And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.